My name is Alina Vance, and I am 31 years old living in Maplewood, New Jersey. I have a quiet apartment here, a neat little space that I try to make feel like home, but it often just feels like a temporary stop. I work as an architectural designer, though not in the exciting, innovative role I once envisioned for myself. I spend my days mostly reviewing permits and making small modifications to existing structures, a far cry from the grand visions I used to pour my heart into. My life is organized, perhaps too organized, a calm surface over a simmering frustration. I've always been someone who notices details, the small things others might miss, which usually serves me well, but sometimes it just makes me feel a little too aware of everything. A little over a year ago, my career took a nosedive, and I've been trying to regain my footing ever since, feeling a shadow hanging over my ambition. The real problem that keeps me awake at night is Marcus Thorne. He was my senior at my previous firm, a charismatic man with an effortless smile and a sharp mind, or so I thought. I poured months of my life into a concept for a new community hub project, a design that I believed was innovative and truly beneficial for the city. I shared my detailed plans, my renderings, my passion with Marcus, trusting him as my mentor. He took my ideas, my hard work, twisted them just enough to claim them as his own, and presented them to the partners, taking all the credit. He soared to a new promotion, lauded as a visionary, while I was subtly sidelined, my contributions minimized, my morale crushed. Eventually, I left, feeling betrayed and deeply wronged, my dream project becoming a bitter monument to his deceit. Marcus Thorne built his success on the ruins of my ambition, and he is still thriving while I am here, quietly navigating a less fulfilling path, a constant ache of injustice in my chest. A few weeks ago, my quiet world had a ripple. I realized I hadn't seen the car of my downstairs neighbor, Mr. Henderson, for several days. He's an older gentleman, probably in his late 60s, and he keeps to himself just like me. We'd only exchanged a dozen words in the 8 months I'd lived here, the usual nods in the hallway, holding a door open, nothing more. But I'm observant, remember. I noticed his car was always parked near mine, and I walked past it every morning on my way to the train. I also hadn't heard the usual sounds of him moving around below me. It sounds odd, but in a quiet building you pick up on these subtle rhythms. A small worry started to nag at me, something beyond just neighborly curiosity. It felt like a small red flag. So I mentioned it to our building manager, just a casual, "Hey, I haven't seen the guy in 4B in a few days, might be worth checking on him." I genuinely forgot about it after that, thinking I had done my part and moved on. Then yesterday, there was a knock on my door. It was Mr. Henderson standing there holding a small tin of biscuits. He looked a bit pale but composed. He told me the building manager had checked on him, that he'd had a fall and hadn't been able to get to his phone. A family member had come to help him after the manager called. He said he wanted to thank whoever had flagged it, and the manager had told him it was me. He was very formal, very composed, but he shook my hand and said, "Miss Vance, you may have done more than you know." I, of course, did not handle it gracefully at all. I blurted out something like, "Oh, it was nothing really, I just noticed," about 4 times, and then stood there holding the biscuits, feeling like a complete idiot. But his words, "You may have done more than you know," kept echoing in my mind, a strange, persistent whisper that started to connect to the deeper, unresolved problem of Marcus Thorne. Mr. Henderson's cryptic words kept replaying in my mind, a puzzle piece that didn't seem to fit anywhere, yet felt important. What exactly had I done more than I knew? I decided to act on that feeling, a quiet determination stirring within me. A few days later, I went downstairs with some homemade cookies, using the visit as an excuse to check on him. He was a bit stronger, and we talked for a while. He seemed like a kind man, a bit lonely. I subtly tried to steer the conversation, asking about his career, his history in Maplewood. He mentioned he used to work for the city's planning department, and before that, he was a foreman on several major construction projects in the area for years, going back decades. He spoke with a quiet intensity about the importance of structural integrity and ethical building practices, something that resonated deeply with my architectural background. I cautiously brought up the new community hub, the one that Marcus Thorne had taken credit for. A flicker of something crossed Mr. Henderson's face, a hardening around his eyes. He paused, then slowly said, "That project. It was built on a foundation of lies, Miss Vance, and not just the architectural plans. There were corners cut, materials swapped out, all to save a pretty penny for certain individuals, all while endangering the public." My heart pounded. He explained that he had a personal vendetta against Marcus Thorne, who wasn't just a charlatan in design but a consistently unethical figure in the city's development. Mr. Henderson had been compiling evidence against Thorne for years, quietly gathering documents, photographs, and even some recorded conversations, but he hadn't known who to trust, who would be brave enough to confront such a powerful figure. He saw my simple act of kindness, my observation, as a sign, a glimmer of hope that someone with integrity could finally bring Thorne down. Empowered by Mr. Henderson's trust and the tangible possibility of exposing Marcus Thorne, I began my own investigation. I started by looking into the public records for the Community Hub project. I spent evenings poring over online databases, trying to find any discrepancies. I reached out to old contacts at my former firm, cautiously asking about the project's early stages, trying to gauge if anyone else had noticed anything amiss. Most were evasive, clearly wary of speaking ill of Marcus Thorne, who was now a celebrated partner. One former colleague, a timid junior architect named Sarah, whispered to me over a coffee that she remembered some unusually quick approvals and material changes that Thorne had pushed through, bypassing standard review processes, but she had been too afraid to question it at the time. This confirmed Mr. Henderson's claims. Armed with this anecdotal evidence and some initial documents from Mr. Henderson that detailed some questionable invoices and supplier changes, I tried to anonymously leak some information to a local investigative reporter I found online, hoping to spark a public inquiry. But Marcus Thorne was far more entrenched and powerful than I had anticipated. My initial attempts to expose him hit a wall. The reporter, after some initial interest, suddenly went silent, citing lack of concrete evidence and a highly litigious subject. It was clear Thorne had either intimidated him or paid him off. Then things started to get personal. My current boss, usually so hands-off, called me into his office to discuss some minor performance issues, things that had never been a problem before. He mentioned an anonymous email claiming I was distracted and unprofessional, subtly hinting that my future at the firm could be at risk if these issues continued. It was a clear warning from Thorne, who had somehow found out I was digging. My work computer started having technical difficulties, and I found my access to certain databases temporarily blocked, making it harder to continue my research during the day. Thorne was tightening the screws. The lowest point came a few weeks later. I received an anonymous package in the mail. Inside was a single disturbing photograph, a close-up of my apartment building's entrance, clearly taken from across the street, zoomed in on my front door. There was no note, just the chilling image. It was a message, a clear threat that he knew where I lived, that he was watching me. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through my determination. I felt utterly exposed and alone. Mr. Henderson, despite his age, noticed my distress and reassured me, reminding me that Thorne used fear as his primary weapon, but that it meant he had something to hide. He revealed more details about Thorne's history of intimidating whistleblowers, and even mentioned a previous incident where Thorne had manipulated evidence to get a competitor's project shut down, causing that person to lose everything. He urged me not to give up, but the threat felt so real, so immediate. I spent sleepless nights, questioning if revenge was truly worth risking my safety, my job, my very peace of mind. All the progress I thought I had made against Thorne seemed to evaporate under the crushing weight of his power. It felt like all was lost, and for a brief, terrifying moment, I considered abandoning everything, letting Marcus Thorne win and just fading back into obscurity to protect myself. But the image of Thorne's smug, triumphant face, built on my stolen dreams and his own unethical shortcuts, gnawed at me more than any fear. Mr. Henderson, noticing my wavering resolve, handed me a small, heavy box he kept hidden in his apartment. Inside were decades of meticulously organized files, notarized statements from former colleagues of Thorne who had been too scared to speak up, detailed photographs of substandard materials used on projects Thorne oversaw, even a few blurry but damning audio recordings of Thorne discussing bribes and shortcuts with contractors. This wasn't just about my stolen design anymore. It was about public safety, about a pattern of corruption that had gone unchecked for far too long. Mr. Henderson looked at me, his eyes full of a quiet fire. "Aliner," he said, using my first name for the first time, "this is bigger than us. This is for everyone he's ever cheated, every corner he's ever cut that put people at risk." His words and the sheer volume of evidence reignited my courage. I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for justice. I decided to make a final, audacious attempt. I needed to present this evidence in a way that Thorne couldn't possibly ignore or dismiss. I scheduled an informational meeting with the mayor's office, under the guise of discussing community input on future architectural projects. I knew Thorne was connected to the mayor's office, so this was a risky move, but it was also the most direct path. I didn't mention Thorne's name in my initial request. On the day of the meeting, I brought a briefcase full of Mr. Henderson's meticulously compiled evidence, along with my own detailed analysis of the structural flaws in Thorne's Community Hub project, highlighting how his cost-saving measures directly led to potential structural weaknesses and future public expense. To my surprise, Marcus Thorne himself was present at the meeting, having been invited by a city council member who was a known acquaintance of his. He entered with his usual confident smirk, clearly expecting a routine discussion, perhaps even a chance to further his own agenda. He barely acknowledged me, dismissing me with a condescending nod. As the meeting began, I presented my findings calmly, professionally. I started by discussing my original vision for the community hub, then seamlessly transitioned into the documented structural and material discrepancies I had uncovered in the existing construction, backing up every claim with Mr. Henderson's undeniable proof, photos, invoices, and even expert assessments he had quietly commissioned over the years. I projected images of substandard rebar, doctored inspection reports, and inflated material costs that didn't match the quality delivered. The room grew silent as the weight of the evidence became apparent. Marcus Thorne's smirk slowly faded, replaced by a horrified disbelief, then a frantic anger. He tried to interrupt, to discredit me, to claim I was a disgruntled former employee with a vendetta, but I anticipated him. I had prepared a timeline, cross-referencing his promotions and bonuses with the dates of the documented malpractices. I ended my presentation by showing a damning audio recording from Mr. Henderson's collection of Thorne explicitly instructing a contractor to use cheaper, untested materials on the Community Hub project, assuring him that he would handle the paperwork. The recording revealed Thorne's casual disregard for safety and his calculated deception. Thorne's face went ashen. He stammered, his usual smooth demeanor crumbling. The mayor's staff, initially skeptical, now looked at him with cold fury. The consequences were swift and devastating for Marcus Thorne. Within days, the mayor's office announced a full investigation into the Community Hub project and all of Thorne's past work. The local news picked up the story, plastering Thorne's disgraced face across every headline. He was immediately suspended from his firm, his partnerships dissolving faster than he could comprehend. Public outcry led to criminal charges for fraud and endangerment. His once glorious career, built on a mountain of lies, crumbled into dust. In the aftermath, a profound sense of peace settled over me, a feeling I hadn't realized I was missing until it filled the void. My name was finally cleared, my integrity recognized. The city decided to revisit the Community Hub project, taking my original ethical designs as the blueprint for a safer, more sustainable structure. I was offered a prominent role in the new design team, a chance to see my vision finally come to life, not for Thorne's glory, but for the community's benefit. I even started my own small architectural consultancy focusing on ethical and sustainable urban development. It was fulfilling work, a true embodiment of what I believed in. Mr. Henderson and I developed a strong, unlikely friendship. We spent many evenings talking, sharing stories, and even working together on community initiatives. He revealed he had once been a promising architect himself, but Thorne had sabotaged his career years ago for similar reasons, forcing him into a different path. He had seen himself in me, a glimmer of the passion Thorne had tried to extinguish in him. His long game had finally paid off, not just for me but for his own quiet, deeply personal revenge. Then, just when I thought all the loose ends were tied, a small, intriguing twist unfolded. Months later, as I was working on the revised Community Hub plans, a package arrived at my new office. Inside was an anonymous letter, neatly typed with no return address. It read, "Ms. Vance, Thorne's arrogance was his downfall, but his network was vast. Be careful, not all of his debts have been paid. Some loyalties run deeper than you know." There was no name, no further explanation, just that unsettling message. It was a subtle warning, a reminder that the world of power and corruption had many layers, and while Marcus Thorne had fallen, the system that allowed him to thrive might still harbor others. My victory felt sweet and complete, but this new message left a lingering chill, a hint that my journey for justice, while triumphant, might not be entirely over, and that new battles, perhaps against unseen forces, could still lie ahead.